Hello, Tara. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. I'm very excited to speak with you. You have built a huge community around your podcast. You have almost 1 million followers on Instagram, which is amazing. And it started, I guess, around what, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, you started this, right?
So, I started my podcast in April of 2022, but I started my
Okay.
Instagram community years ago back in 2017. So,
Okay.
this was sort of the podcast came after all the work that I had been doing on
hmm
social.
Okay. So you didn't start from the void.
No.
You started a podcast around 2 years ago.
Mhm.
Uh, you were telling me before that you thought it was going to be easier, right? You were saying that there was like a celebrity that's like, no, she's just complaining too much. Is it easy? Is it an easy endeavor to have a podcast?
Well, so I'll tell you a quick story. When I was first starting my podcast, I was probably two or three episodes into it, and I had a celebrity on the show, and she and I happened to share the same production team. So that's how she was on the show. And she was like, "Oh man, having a podcast is so much work. It's so much pre production and post production. And there's so much that goes into it." And at the time, like I said, I was only a few episodes into mine and I thought it was pretty easy at that point. And I was like, okay, yeah, whatever. And I was sort of like thinking that she was just saying that because she was like a celebrity and it was like, she wasn't used to like hard work. And I'm putting that in quotes, like she wasn't used to like hard work. So I was like, oh, she's just saying that. She like doesn't really know like whatever, like what is considered hard work. Well, now let me tell you, 2 years later, yes, podcasting is a lot of work. I spend so much of my time with pre-production and post-production, booking my guests and getting the questions and all of that kind of stuff that like, yeah, she was right. She was totally right. Whether she was a celebrity or not a celebrity or whatever, yeah, she's right.
Yeah.
Podcasting is a lot of work.
What do you think changed? So at first you were in your first episodes, or 3 4 episodes, and now obviously you have much more. uh, what has changed mostly so that now you think it's a lot of work? Was that then you just didn't were not putting enough into your podcasting? Did you just increase your production? What has changed so that it's so much harder now and much more work now?
I think that, like I said, I was only a few episodes in. So I had only, booked a few guests, written a few questions, wrote like one or two show notes at that point. And then once you start batch recording, it's a lot of guests to book and it's a lot of keeping your files straight and all of that kind of stuff. And then
hmm
show notes were like taking me forever and like they shouldn't have, but they were. And so, um, it's not that you know what I think it was in the beginning? I didn't know what I didn't know. And I think that's really what it came down to is it was simply
yeah.
it's just like I lacked the experience to know how much went into a show. And like I said, I do. I'm approaching 100 episodes.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I've done it many times now over the last 2
Mhm.
years and so, yeah, she was right. It can be a lot of work.
Give us a pitch on your podcast. What is it about? Like a 30-second speech of your pod.
Sure, sure. So my show is called Modern Mom Probs, and I like to say it's where we try to solve the world's modern mom problems, but if we can't solve them, at least we're having fun talking about them.
Amazing. And you said that you started previously with your Instagram. Was it also around motherhood? The topic was
Yes.
it the same?
Yeah, it's always been about motherhood, and when I first started my account, it was more sort of a humor-based account, talking more
Okay.
about sort of like first world mom problems, like silly things that American moms tend to deal with. And then
hmm
as the years progressed, the account really evolved into talking more about more serious motherhood issues. So I do talk about very like funny, silly things that we deal with in parenthood, but I also then talk about more serious things like, maternal mental health and the mental load of motherhood and a lot of like deeper topics. And so it runs the gamut of both humorous and serious. But
hmm
I like to say that if it falls underneath the umbrella of a modern mom problem, then I'm going to talk about it.
hmm And you started this. Why did you start it? I mean, obviously, I guess you're a mom and you wanted to talk about those topics. But why starting with Instagram? And was it? Did you always thought that this could be a business for you, or
Yes.
you thought?
So
Mm.
Yeah, no, no, it's true. So, funny story. My background is actually, I used to work at Nickelodeon in the social media
Okay.
department.
Mm-hmm.
When my son was born, I left Nickelodeon to stay home with my son full time. And when he was about 3, there was a shiny new website called Canva that was just coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And there was Instagram, obviously. And I said to my friends and family, this was like February of 2016. I said to my friends and family, I'm going to start an Instagram account about parenting. And they're like, you what? And I was like, yeah, no, no, it's going to be a thing. Like, and I'm going to monetize it. And they're like, what? And no one was really doing that back then in like February of 2016. And so I did. And then it had a different name at the time. It was called NYC Mom Probs because I was talking about like New York City mom problems. But
Mm-hmm.
then in 2017, I changed the name to Modern Mom Probs, and the account just took off from there. So, yes, that was
Ah.
always my goal. Also, like I was looking for community, I was looking to make friends online, and I did. And I had friends from all over the country, all over the world.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it just really took off from there. And then in 2022, I had the opportunity to start the podcast, and it just seemed to make sense because then I was able to have 30-minute 40-minute conversations about these motherhood topics, these
Right.
parenting topics, that you could cover in a better way than you could otherwise do in a 10-second reel, in a ten
Mm-hmm.
second video.
I'm curious to know how the podcast changed your connection with your community and your business.
It's a great question. One thing that I'm still working on is like bringing my Instagram following over to listening to the podcast because
Mm.
people consume media in many different ways. Some people love podcasts. And so you're going to find those people and you'll find your community there. Some of the other Instagram people or TikTok people are just on those platforms to consume really quick hits of dopamine, quick hits of
Yeah.
content. They're not
Mm-hmm.
looking to invest 40 minutes into, your life. And so and that's fine too. That's just something that obviously you just have to know your audience and sort of like meet them where they are. So
Right.
for my podcast listeners, I do it there. For my Instagram people, I try to bring it over, but it doesn't always translate exactly the same way because
Mm-hmm.
you know what? They're just not there for that. So
Yeah.
it depends.
Yeah, totally. I mean, everyone is different. Some people prefer reading, people prefer videos, others obviously voice or
Yep.
audio. Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here, and I think there's a lot of knowledge we can extract from you, not only from podcasting but also community building.
Mm,
The first thing that when you're describing how your business started, there's one question that came to my mind, which was you started with New York, right? Which
yeah.
is it's niche, right? This is about moms. It's about New York American moms, about New Yorker moms,
Hmm.
and then you did the transition to okay, now let's go all around, America, all around the world. And you said that since then it kind of blew up, and this is a bit contradictory with the information I get, which is you should niche down, you should like really go to a niche specific topic. So what are your thoughts on that? Why do you think that changing this from New York to America actually made it blew up and reach out more moms?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. You're right. Everyone's always like niche down, niche down, niche down. And it's
Mm-hmm.
true. You hear that all the time. And again, I did make this change in 2017. So this is, several years ago. But I
Mm-hmm.
think what it comes down to is that, New York was so specific to talk about things that we deal with in New York City versus, I don't know, Los Angeles or San Francisco, which also, I mean, when you're living in a city, parenting is pretty much the same one way or the other versus living in a suburb. But that's a different topic altogether. But you know what it is? When I
Interesting.
changed the name to Modern Mom Problems, moms all over the country, all over the world were like, yes, I relate to that. I identify to that. And so it just worked. I remember the night before made the switch, I was chatting with another Instagram friend of mine. She has an account
Mm-hmm.
called Mommy Wine Time. And so she and I were like DMing, and I was like, I need a new adjective to describe the account. And so she and I were going back and forth and we were brainstorming, listing different adjectives. And then I said, how about modern? And she was like, oh,
Mm.
yes, I love it. And she lives in the middle of the country. She lives in the middle of America. And she relates to that, just as well as, someone living in New York City. So
Right.
it's just funny how that one word made all the difference. And then, like I said, even from a topic perspective, I originally started talking about funny, silly things, and then it evolved to more serious things. And as I mentioned before, as long as it's underneath the umbrella of a modern mom problem, I'm going to talk about it or address it.
Mm-hmm.
And it like I said, it made all the difference. So, is it the opposite of niching down? Yes, probably, but at the same time, I've had success from it.
Hmm. But why do you think that is? So is that because you just changed the title, and do you think it was an SEO situation where people were searching for this keyword specifically,
No,
or
I
they
don't.
just saw the title of your community and they say, yeah, that's it. Whereas
Mhm.
with the previous title, most people would not connect with it. They would think, okay, I don't live in that city, so it's not for me.
Yes, I think that's exactly what it
Okay.
is. There's something very powerful about the word modern because people want
Mm-hmm.
to consider themselves modern people. They want to think that they're forward thinking, that they're not, antiquated in any way. And they're like, yes, I'm a forward thinker. I'm modern. I want to be part of this community. And it makes sense. And like I said, the things we talk about sort of like the things we talk about are defined by being a part of the modern age, being part of the 21st century. Because if we're talking about screen time for children or
Mm-hmm.
on cell phones and TikTok and stuff like that, like that's not an issue that our parents had with us or our
Right.
grandparents had, right? So it's like if we're talking about like how much screen time our 10-year-old is getting, it's not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily something that was present with other
Mm-hmm.
generations. And
Yeah,
so
that's a
that's what
very
makes it
interesting.
modern.
Yeah, totally. And it's always changing as well. The modern, and modern part it's changing so much. Especially TikTok is something quite new. The shorts is something quite new, and
Hmm.
it changed a lot. Also, like the interaction with the phones.
Yeah.
How do you go about researching those topics? Right? Is it only based on your personal experience, or do you try to do some research on the science around screen time? And I'm interested in knowing how do you explore these topics.
Yeah. Well, on my show, I invite a lot of authors, and they often are the ones that do a lot of the research. And they always send me their books. I mean, I have heaps and stacks of books at home, similar to like your background, right? Like, I just have
Mm-hmm.
so many books because authors are constantly sending me things, which is very nice. And I'm very lucky for that. And so I have the opportunity to read through many of them. So, yes, I do my research based upon my guests. Research and then them coming on the show and we talk about their books.
Okay.
So that's often how it happens. It's a lot of guests, and then like I pick their brain, and then they share their knowledge. They drop their knowledge
Mm-hmm.
on that. Um, and then I'm constantly reading about these topics, though, whether it's newspaper
Mm-hmm.
articles, magazine articles, books, all of that. So yeah, I feel very entrenched in all of that information.
What was the most kind of game changing conversation? I guess you probably had a lot, but is there something that comes to mind that you said, yeah, this completely changed the way I educate my children? Uh,
A
Something comes
lot
to
of
mind?
yeah, no, there was one particular author and she wrote a book which was so moving, and it was about like how to parent and how to connect with your kids in a certain way. And her book was so powerful, and so when I spoke with her, it was just like a very meaningful conversation because her book resonated so well. And so
Mm-hmm.
we were able to talk about her parenting style and my parenting style. And so that one like particularly resonated with me.
Mm-hmm.
I also had Tiffany Amber Thiessen on the show. She was on a show called Saved by the Bell when I was younger, and
Mm-hmm.
I loved her growing up. And so that one was like really cool because it was like talking to like a hero that you had, when
Oh
you were a
yeah.
kid, and so that was
Mm-hmm.
very cool. But going back to like podcasting stuff, I had technical difficulties that day on my laptop, and on the platform we were using. She was fine, and ultimately like all of her files saved properly. Mine did
Oh.
not. And so then my production team I had to like go back and like re-record all of my parts. And so
Oh.
it was so sad because like she and I had a great banter going back and forth
Mm-hmm.
like as the conversation, but we lost that banter, or like it was just on her side but it was not on my side. So then I had to go back and re-record my questions, and then ultimately like the final project ended up being like 15 minutes long versus like the 30 minutes that it had been. It
Oh,
was
that's a
very
good.
robotic. It was like question, answer, question, answer,
Mm-hmm.
question, answer. When, like I said, we had like a lovely conversation. And so, sometimes technology is just like that. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
podcasts can just be like that. So you have to definitely, give yourself grace in what you do.
Yeah, that is my worst nightmare, to be honest. I'm every time I finish each interview, I go and listen to everything. Is okay? Is it fine? Right? And um, yeah, I
And I
especially being such a special episode for you, right? Having this must
yes.
have been really painful.
It broke my heart because, like I said, she was an idol that, I had since I was like a little kid, and to have the
Mm,
opportunity to chat with her. She had a new cooking book out, so a new cookbook. So she was there promoting her cookbook. And
right.
I was so excited to have the opportunity to chat with her, and we hit it off really
Mm-hmm.
well. And then, like I said, the episode ended up just being like question, answer, question, answer.
Mm-hmm. You said something that also made me really curious, which is about discussing different types of motherhood and education. What is your style? I'm curious about that.
Oh, style? Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I mean, like, as far as my show itself, it is a lot of it's an interview style, right? But my
Mm,
interview style is very conversational. And so sometimes, as I'm chatting with somebody, like I just throw the questions out altogether. It depends on the guest, and it depends on
mhm,
the energy that I get back from the guest. So like if I'm bringing high energy and they're bringing high energy, guess what? I'm not going to use the questions. But if I'm bringing high energy and they're bringing low energy, then
right.
I may have to fall back on the questions as like a framework. Um,
Mhm,
but as far as my style, I think that like I said, I think I'm pretty high energy. And
mhm,
everyone always like, we always finish the call and everyone's like, oh my God, that was so much fun. Or, oh my God, you're such a good interviewer. Or like, oh my God, I
nice,
really
nice.
loved chatting with you. And so I hear that, 9 times out
Mhm,
of 10, which is amazing. And
that's
many
amazing.
times, yeah, it's very cool. It's such a compliment. And many times too, the people that I'm bringing on the show, I know through Instagram, or I know
Mhm,
through like my network of people. So, I mean, obviously, so I don't know everybody,
mhm,
and publicists reach out to me to have their authors on the show, and so those people I usually don't know. But you have to do your due diligence. You have to do research in order to be
mhm,
able to like chat with somebody about their book, chat with somebody about the projects that they're working on.
mhm. And is your voice, your style, the same in Instagram and your podcasting and throughout social media, or do you have to kind of adjust it?
That's an excellent question. I say that on my podcast, I am 100% myself because I don't feel that it's performative. And I feel on social media, everything is so performative. So
Mhm,
I prefer the podcast because I really do get to be myself. But versus like doing something on social, I clam up. And so like I don't necessarily bring my same high vibes and high energy on social for like short form videos as I do with
okay.
my podcast or even in person. I have so many friends who are content creators that when we meet in person, they're always like, "Oh my gosh, you're so different in real life and on social." I'm like, "Yeah." I was like, "I'm so much better in real life than I am on social." Because this sounds silly, but like I get shy, and I don't know why. I just do because, like I said, I feel like it's sort of like performative in what it is, and so
Totally, yes.
yeah. So I
I've
am
had this
definitely
experience
myself.
too. I have this experience, especially on Twitter, uh, with my community is more the entrepreneurship, and so I've met already some of these Twitter, not influencers, but they
Hmm.
have quite a lot of followers,
Yeah.
and I was shocked because they are in a way their tweets, and then when I met them, yeah, they were generally more shy. So yeah, it's definitely a performance, right? It's something that you're doing for a crowd. It's not a stage performance, but it's a kind of it's a different stage. Let's put it this
Yes,
way.
it is
One
exactly.
one thing that is really interesting for me here is that a lot of people, they start their podcasting, so especially the listeners here, they start with a podcast and then they share it through social media. For you
Mhm,
was the opposite, but I guess I can make the same question. Once you launch a new episode, a lot of people will just say, hey, new episode is out, and they'll share it on Instagram, Twitter, whatever. What
mhm.
is the best way to, and I know this is still a challenge for you, but from everything you've learned, what is the best way to bring people from these platforms to become listeners of your podcast?
That's something that I'm still working through
Hmm.
myself, but each week I do create a video clip from the show that I share on social. Um, and then I also, depending on what the topic is, especially if it's something like entrepreneurial, I'll share it on LinkedIn as well. And I've actually had a lot of success with that because not everything I chat about is motherhood. And sometimes it might be working motherhood or I had this one episode which I loved. It was about the age of the personal brand, how like everyone now has to be a brand. That was a great episode that I put on LinkedIn, and it did very well from there. So
Hmm.
I find that link, depending on the topic, LinkedIn definitely does well because I think those people are poised. That audience is more poised to listen to a 40-minute episode than sometimes the um the
Ah,
Instagram
interesting.
people are.
Yeah.
Yeah, so like I said, it depends. Like I don't really post like parenting stuff on LinkedIn, but entrepreneurial stuff or working parents, like that kind of stuff, I will post on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
But yeah, I
So
always do the
you
video
repurpose
clips.
the content. So you get a podcast of 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and you find little nuggets of interesting content that then you repurpose into wherever LinkedIn, and in hopes that by people they'll consume this content, they'll be like, okay, I like Tara, I want to listen to her podcast. Is that it?
Correct. That's exactly what
Hmm.
it is. Yep.
And now I have to bring a little bit of Podsqueeze into this
Yeah.
episode. We what we try to do is help podcasters repurpose their content, right? That's kind of our mission. How do you use Podsqueeze in your flow? Can it help or is it helping for you to get your pod into different formats?
Yeah, I think it's a game changer because I started using it. I was one of like the earlier users, if you remember. I was sort of like an early adopter.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And it was a game changer for me because I don't know
And
if
I
you
have
remember.
to say that we were super excited when we saw. I was like, "Oh my god, she's like 1 million views! Like someone is really." Joe and I were like so excited when we saw you,
Yeah,
starting
no,
using this. So we really appreciate that.
of course, of course. And like I said, it's a game changer for me because the one thing I dread every week, or I used to dread, was writing the show notes. And
Mhm.
I would like sit there and I would like think about it and like not know what to write and this and that. And so now every week I put my episode, the file, into Podsqueeze, and then it just, it does its magic that it does. And then it pops
Mhm.
up the show notes. And then so I usually will sort of take a combination between what comes up as the show notes and then what also comes up as a blog post, and I sort of like put it together, and that's what I like. Then I make my own magic, and then I put that out as my show notes each week. But like I said, it saves
Mhm.
me so much time from where it was, and I don't even know really what I would do with that. I would continue to be staring at a blank page.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you, by the way, also for being a user for so long and also putting up with all the flaws that we've been developing and that we've been improving upon. But yeah, really appreciate your support there on that. As the last question for you, so let's say someone one is starting their Instagram, right? So they have a podcast or not, but let's assume that they have a podcast and they want to
Hmm.
grow on Instagram because their listeners are there. You obviously had a lot of success. So, uh, what's the recipe? Like, if you were starting all over again, how would you grow in 2024 your Instagram account?
Yeah. The whole thing is based on community. I've said that for, for forever because really at the heart of social media is what? Being social, right? Is having a community, is making connection,
Mm-hmm.
is making friends. So reach out to people, support people. I always say that the tide rises all ships, right? So the more that I'm supporting podcasters, they're supporting me. I'm supporting other content creators, they're supporting me. And then we could like vent about things, we could talk about things. And
Mm-hmm.
so find your community, create your community, nurture your community, and that's where you'll find
Mm-hmm.
success.
How can one nurture their community? How does is answering them, is creating content for them? What
It's
is the
it's
best tips?
creating content for them that resonates, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so create things that maybe you're helping them solve a problem, or that you're answering a question, or you're allowing them to feel seen. Lately on Instagram, I've been putting out a lot of like sort of open-ended questions where I'm asking people something about themselves, and those have been my best performing
Interesting.
posts recently because I think that people just want to feel seen and they want to have their
Mm-hmm.
opinion heard, and like in a way that it's sort of like, there's no right or wrong answer. There's no
Right.
real
Right.
like, oh, you're wrong for feeling like this. Like,
Hmm.
no. Last night I posted something about, if you're older than 30, what advice would you give someone who isn't 30 yet? And that post is like
Wow.
absolutely blowing up because everyone is putting, like, writing down this different life advice that they hold, true to themselves and sacred to
Yeah.
themselves. And so there's no right or wrong answer to that, right? But people by the thousands are writing, their best nuggets of advice. And let me tell you, like, it's really good advice. They're saying really
I
good
need to
things.
go and read that.
Yes,
Uh,
it is. It's
what
so
do you
good.
optimize for? Do you optimize for likes? Do you optimize for comments? For views? What should one optimize for?
I think people should optimize for comments and shares more than likes. I think shares are so important because you could tell that when a post is really starting to do well, obviously it's getting shared a lot. And so then the more shares you get, the more visibility there is on your account. So definitely aim for the shares. And like I said, I like the comments on those open-ended questions just because I
Mhm.
see how well they're performing. And like I said, people just want to be seen. They just want to have something to say
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
very low
Totally.
stakes way.
In a way, even though of course it's personal branding and you are the center of this community, you want that the community to work a little bit without you as well, right? You want them to talk with each other,
Absolutely.
and you are just the glue that kind of connects everyone. Is that right?
Beautifully said. Yes, that's exactly what it
Mm.
is. For years, even before I ever started the show, for years on social, I used to say that Modern Mom Probs is not about me. It's not about the Tara Clark show. It's about the topics. And I've said
Mm.
that for such a long time. And I still genuinely believe that nowadays, like, because it is like the age of the personal brand and everyone has to be like a
Right.
person and a brand and stuff and relatable. But I still think that at the heart of it, it's the topics that bring people together. It's the
Right.
topic. It's
Hmm.
talking about the topics that help people feel seen.
Hmm. What is the most common mistake you see people do in social media?
Trying to be like everyone else, just following the trends and just like not. You know what it is? It happens to me too. So I can't say I'm not guilty about this. I think people sometimes spend too much time consuming social media and not enough time creating. And from what I've seen from my friends who are very successful content creators is that they put blinders on and they just stay in their own lane and they create the content that they want to create regardless of what other people are doing. And
Right.
those people have tend to be the most successful.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
Last question, and this is a must. Social media for your children. When, and this is a huge topic for sure. So maybe this is keeping it short, but like, what is your thoughts on this? Like, social media, is there an age when they should start? Is there something that we should do to somehow control? What is your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, this could be a whole separate episode
Yeah.
altogether, right? So, technically children are not supposed to go on social media until they are 13. That's like with
Okay.
Meta, right? So you cannot start an Instagram account until you're at least 13 years old. And I'm a firm believer of that. And for me, I think we would probably push it even further. My son is 11 right now, and he's not on traditional social media. Although, depending on who you ask, sometimes people say YouTube is social media, and they'll sometimes
Right.
say Roblox is social media. And so my son is on both Roblox and on YouTube, but he is not on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, any Snapchat, any of those. So yeah, it sort of depends on who you ask and what platform they're talking about. Um, it's super important to know what your kids are looking at and to know what they're consuming, because sometimes, my son's watching YouTube shorts and I'm like, oh no, because some of the stuff is just
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
appropriate.
Shorts are bad. Yeah.
Yeah, shorts are crazy. Like, I feel like most
Hmm.
parents like don't know that because, yeah, I don't know, but some of the YouTube shorts are like, they're out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have to monitor what he's watching, and if he sees something that like he shouldn't have seen, then we need to talk about it, and set boundaries and have an open dialogue. And I think the whole key about social media is having an open dialogue with your children, and so that's
Hmm.
where it starts.
Does it scare you? What impact this social media and shorts might have with the youth
It
and the
it
children of
doesn't
these days?
scare me per se. I mean, the only thing that would scare me is if a child maybe, engaged in self-harm or something like that. Like that obviously scares me.
Yeah.
But overall, no, I think it's important to the foundation of a child parent relationship is so important for like everything in their lives, right? And so going back to what I said about having an open dialogue is like if you're fostering your relationship with your child in such a way that they feel comfortable telling you certain things, then like you need to sort of like lean into that so that they can tell you things honestly and they feel that you're not going to place judgment on them, because the reason why and
Hmm.
when kids don't tell their parents things, it's because their parents are going to be judgy on them. The kids are like, oh, I'm not going to tell my parents, they're going to judge me. And so you need to sort of foster that relationship where they trust you and you trust them, and that they trust you enough to know that you're not going to be judgy about what they're doing. And that's part of the social media, right? And so
Hmm.
if my son comes up to me and says like he watched this one uh YouTube short about like Riz is like this new thing now. It's like, I don't know if you know about
Hmm.
like charisma. Anyway,
I know.
that's a separate thing altogether. But he was like telling me these Riz lines, and I was like, oh my God, these Riz lines are crazy. But like that gives us an opportunity for us to talk about it, it's that you're not going to repeat
Interesting.
that to other people and you're not going to say that to a
Uh-huh.
girl, like all of that kind of stuff. Um, so yeah, it does not scare me per se. I think it just needs to be spoken about in the open, like in a very respectful way, so that they know that I'm not going to judge him and that the children in general know that they're not going to be judged, so that they could be honest about what they're seeing.
Hmm. That is great advice. That's great advice, and I think it also now for the listeners of this podcast, they'll be like, okay, I wanna listen more of this, and I want to listen to Tara speak about this topic. So if they do, where can they where can they listen to you? Like, tell us again the name of your
Yes,
podcast, your Instagram, and everything.
absolutely. So I'm big into branding in as much as, so my podcast is called Modern Mom Probs. My Instagram account is Modern Mom Probs. I have a book called Modern Mom Probs. So anything underneath Modern Mom Probs, you are going to find me there.
Perfect. I will also link it in the show notes of this episode. Tara, was a pleasure. Thank you so much for being a user of Podsqueeze and also for making great content and put it and helping moms all around the world.
Thanks so much for having me.
This podcast is brought to you by Podsqueeze, an essential tool for podcasters that creates show notes, timestamps, clips, and more. Visit podsqueeze.com and use the code PODCASTER for 20% discount in the first 3 months. We release a new episode every Tuesday and Thursday. See you in the next episode of Lessons from a Podcaster.